Now, in the video, the person who's taking the video and calling him a snitch, it sounds like he said that you called the boys on me or something like that. So this may be the person who was, on his property, or he allegedly called the police on and stuff like that. I'm not sure. I don't have the information. Oh, salute, Miss Tiara, Miss Sharonda, returning members. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate the support. Hey, hold on. Let me Yeah, so I'm not sure of that. The Truth to Power podcast. Salute. So it sounds like in the video, Uncle Ralph, salute. It sounds like in the video, whoever's calling him a snitch on the camera and all that is claiming that he called the boys. And this right here is a complicated thing. And when you younger, I come from the streets and certain things. I was into certain activities in the past. And it's a code of the streets and stuff like that. But when you young and you in that life, sometimes you don't think about, when you get older and you get out that life, and maybe you open up a business, or you purchase property and things of that nature. And if a crime happens to you, or someone is on your property, or stuff like that, it's like, once you get out the streets and once you get out that life, does the rules not apply no more? Can you now call the authorities, cooperate with the police? To tell you the truth, I don't know. I was never this was never something brought up, as I was growing up. So, now that I'm at a certain age, it's something to think about. So it's very complicated. It's a very complicated situation, in the eyes of, a civilian, or, people like that. He did nothing wrong if he did allegedly call the authorities, if somebody was allegedly, on his property and stuff like that, because, that's your legal property. You own it, and you don't want to break the law and stuff like that, so. But in the eyes of somebody, in the streets or from the streets, they may see it, differently. Like me, is very like for me, I'm on one hand, I feel like, that's what he's supposed to do. It's his property, and you don't want to, end up in jail and stuff like that. But on the other hand, if you come from that type of life, it don't matter if you're out the life or whatever, you still, got to stick to those codes. Now that may be childish and stuff like that. I don't have the answers, but it's something to think about. And on online, all of these people, being called, rats and snitches and stuff. I see, it varies throughout. People got different definitions of what a snitch is, what a rat is. But once them allegations is put on you, things run wild, especially in the public. So me personally, I always thought, if you go to the authorities and get somebody arrested, then you a snitch, you a rat. If you come from that life, if you was living that life and stuff like that, street justice is what it is, because there's plenty of times that you may have committed a crime or something like that, and people stuck to the code, and just because you out that life doesn't mean now you can go to the authorities because you got away with that. Like it's something you got away with, and things of that nature. So I don't know. Me personally, I wouldn't have, and it may sound ignorant and childish and foolish, and it may be, because that's an ignorant, childish mentality and lifestyle. When you're coming up, because that's why you get into these things when you're young, and you don't think about the future when you become, an adult and stuff like that. So me, if I had a property or something like that, if I had the finances, I would hire like some type of manager or security or something like that where they can do that. You feel what I'm saying? But sometimes you don't have the resources or the currency. You feel me? So it's complicated, as I said. You shouldn't risk your personal property if someone is violating it. Use. Right. Like I said, coming from, a civilian or something like that, that's it, is nothing, that's the right thing to do. If someone is on your property, I have the right to protect it at all means. Yeah. Right. Ming, salute. Bobby Ramos. Yeah, it's very complicated. It's very complicated. And it's difficult, especially if you grown up in that life, especially being a black man, and not a black person, and not only a black person, but someone in that culture. Because in different cultures, the definition of snitching and stuff like that it varies. But in the culture I come from, or they may call it the hip hop culture, or the black urban American culture, whatever you want to call it, if you tell on somebody and they go to jail, that's considered snitching or ratting. It don't matter who it is. It don't matter what it's for and who it is. So, it gets real. And it's a childish mentality. Is a juvenile way of thinking. Sexy J, salute. But it's plenty of times, I got away with stuff that may have put me away, forever. So, people could have, told on me about certain things and all that, even my opposition and stuff like that. So, it's whack. There's a lot of people sitting in jail right now because they wouldn't, tell or snitch, and they probably was innocent. They probably know the truth. They probably know, but they're sitting in jail forever because they standing on these principles and things like that. And people who is not in that life, probably look at it like that's stupid, it's dumb. Why would you do that and all that? But if you really into that life, it kind of makes sense. But it's not. I'm not saying it's right or, But when it comes to snitching and ratting, like especially in our culture, and in my culture, it goes back to COINTELPRO. It goes back to something different. It's like, our people didn't come from criminals. See, a lot of people look at us as criminals and gang members and drug addicts and drug dealers. That's not our culture. We come from God-fearing Christians. This culture of this criminal culture and all of that, we learned that from our oppressor and colonizer. That's where we learned that from. We was God-fearing Christians, and we had a civil rights movement and movements that, fought for people's rights and freedoms in America and all over the world. And, our own government infiltrated us and, got some of our people to turn on us and stuff like that. So it's deeper than just committing crimes and all of that, because at one time, and sometimes to this day, we considered by our government, a threat and things like that. Wong, salute. So, a lot of people don't understand, there's a lot of political soldiers, political prisoners from, that civil rights movement, the Black Panthers and stuff like that, that's incarcerated to this day. And, the Black Panthers was a party. It was a political party, such as the Independent Party, the Democrats, Republicans, even the Communist Party, so, the more I learn about things, it's kind of, 22 Ronin, salute. But I'm not justifying none of this or stuff like that, but I'm just saying we have a deep rooted culture in not cooperating with the powers that be, or the man, we used to call it, or the government. We have a deep rooted culture, and not only from criminals and all of that, from regular people in our culture, because at one point in time, they were against us. So it's deeply ingrained in us not to trust the police, not to cooperate. The government is against us. Like, it's deeply ingrained into our culture. You got to remember, the police started out as like slave catchers. So you had slavery, and then after we was quote unquote free, they came up with the vagrant. I forgot what it's called. Something laws where if you don't have a job and stuff like that, you'll be incarcerated. So some people went straight out from slavery from working for free until, being so-called free and not having no job, and then put right back into prison. So, it's kind of, man, Aaron, salute. So a lot of people don't understand, our culture, heritage, our history. So, which brings us to today, where a lot of people in our communities, or what is left of our communities, if they're not criminals, if they, they're not going to cooperate with the authorities. Because, even, with the stop and frisk, the racial profiling, like these things carried on into the future, into modern day times, where, we get pulled over, even, as young people, our parents teach us, you gotta remember how, this is a racist system and all of that. So you don't have the same rights. You're supposed to have the same rights, but you don't have the same rights as, maybe other type of people. So if the police pull you over and violate your rights, don't speak out. Don't exercise your rights. Just go along with it. Because, you might lose your life. You feel me? BMW shot, salute. So I just want to, put that out there, but back to